It started with a scream no one heard, on a night Norfolk would never forget. Susan Long leaves work heading home along a familiar route, but she never makes it. By morning, the search ends in horror. Susan is found brutally murdered, her life taken with no warning, no mercy, and most chilling of all, no answers. No weapon, no eyewitnesses, no clear motive. Just a family devastated, a stunned community, and a killer who vanished into the Norfolk night. More than half a century later, one question still haunts every step of that lonely road. Who murdered Susan Long? Welcome to Crimes That Haunt Us. We release a new case every Sunday at 6 p.m, so hit subscribe and don't miss the next one. And let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Susan Margaret Long was born in 1952 in the small, flint-walled market town of Aylsham, Norfolk, a community of only 2,635 people, where the weekly cattle market still drew farmers in flat caps and the same families that had lived in the same streets for generations. She was the only child of Derek Long, a self-employed joiner, and Molly Long, who worked part-time as a canteen assistant at an Aylsham school. The family home was a modest house on Sir William's Lane, a quiet cul-de-sac of identical red brick homes opposite the school playing fields where Susan had once played rounders. Being both an only child and an only grandchild on both sides of the family, she was the absolute center of her parents' and grandparents' world. From the age of 5, she attended Aylsham Church of England Primary School on Red Lion Street, then moved at 11 to the Aylsham Secondary School on the very same street that she lived, no more than just a few minutes' walk from her front door. Classmates remembered her as quietly confident, neat in her uniform, and particularly gifted at shorthand and typing. She left school in July 1968 with 5 O-levels and immediately secured a coveted position as a junior shorthand typist at the Norwich Union Insurance Group head office on Surrey Street in Norwich. Every weekday morning, she caught the 8:15 Eastern Counties bus from Aylsham Market Place, clutching her monthly bus pass, and returned on the evening with the same service. In November 1969, Susan began her first serious romance with 19-year-old Brian Tungate, an apprentice gas fitter who lived with his parents in Norwich. Brian later told detectives they had met through mutual friends at a church youth club dance in the city and that Susan was his first proper girlfriend. The relationship moved quickly but decorously, with Saturday cinema dates, Sunday afternoon walks along the River Wensum, and increasingly tea at Brian's mother's house before evenings out. They had planned on becoming engaged very soon. As things stood, Susan was very happy and content in her short life thus far. Tuesday, 10th of March 1970, began like any other working day. Susan left Sir William's Lane at 7:50 a.m. and walked the short distance to Aylsham Market Place and boarded the 8:05 a.m. number 10 bus to Norwich. She worked her normal 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. shift at the Norwich Union, typing correspondence in the general office on the second floor. At 5:35 p.m., she walked the short distance to Brian Tungate's house, where she had dinner with Brian and his mother. By early evening, the couple had left for the Gala Ballroom on St. Stephen's Road, arriving just after the live band struck up. They danced, socialized, and had fun right up until the lights came up at 10:20 p.m. At exactly 10:25 p.m., outside Norwich bus station on Surrey Street, Brian kissed Susan goodbye. Then he watched her join the short queue for the 10:30 p.m. number 10 service to Aylsham. They waved at each other as the double-decker pulled away. Tragically, Susan had only recently just purchased her first car. Her monthly bus pass was due to expire, and this was to have been her very last journey home by the bus. She would be driving to and from her Norwich job henceforth. The number 10 bus left Norwich bus station at 10:30 p.m. sharp with all of its passengers on board. It followed the usual route along the A140 through Helston, Horsford and Marsham, arriving at Aylsham Marketplace at precisely 11:10 p.m. The conductor and witnesses would later confirm that Susan was the last passenger to alight, stepping down onto the cobbles. This would be the last time Susan Long is seen alive. She then likely turned right, the most direct route to Sir William's Lane, a distance of just 500 yards that should have taken no more than 7 minutes. At approximately 12:30 a.m. on the morning of Wednesday, 11th of March, a local resident looked out of an upstairs window and saw the headlights of a suspicious vehicle moving slowly near the Mucklands sewage works, less than half a mile from the Long family home. The car appeared to stop for several minutes before driving away towards Burgh Road. Despite repeated appeals over the following decades, the driver of that vehicle has never been traced. At 5:15 a.m. that morning, milkman Ronald Pryke was making his deliveries along Burgh Road when his headlights picked out something pale in a roadside puddle at Spratt's Green, a notorious local lover's lane hidden from the main road and known only to Aylsham residents. There, he saw Susan lay face down in no more than 8 inches of muddy water. Her clothing was disheveled, and she had been dragged a short distance from where the attack likely began. There were obvious indications of assault, and the scene suggested the perpetrator had attempted to conceal the body in the water. Curiously, the scene bore few signs of a drawn-out struggle, leading pathologists to later theorize the attack unfolded with shocking speed once Susan reached the lane, perhaps luring her there under false pretenses. Forensics would later reveal that semen samples collected from her clothing had belonged to a man with an exceptionally rare blood profile, matching just 4% of the population, while skin cells found under her fingernails hinted at a frantic, close-quarters fight where she clawed at his face or hands. Nearby, tire tracks in the mud, fresh and deep, suggested the killer's vehicle had idled there before fleeing into the dawn. The DNA would later be successfully extracted in 2004 from the semen and bloodstains on her clothing, creating a full profile of the offender. This profile has been entered into the National DNA Database, but yielded no matches to date. Her left slingback shoe, size 6.5, and a blue and white bead bracelet with a gold filigree clasp were missing from the crime scene and have to this day remained missing. Small automotive paint flakes were found embedded in her clothing, suggested to have come from a vehicle that was originally painted pompadour blue and then later resprayed metallic maroon. Police subsequently would appeal for owners of such cars in the area to come forward, but no leads were forthcoming. Fibers and dirt from the lane were consistent with the rural setting. No murder weapon was recovered, and there were no eyewitnesses from the bus stop where she was last seen alighting at 11:10 p.m. By 6 p.m, Burgh Road was sealed shut to the public as detectives and forensics continued to process the ghastly scene. Later that morning, Derek and Molly Long were told the news at their home on Sir William's Lane. Within hours, the investigation was placed under the joint command of Detective Chief Superintendent John Cass of Scotland Yard Murder Squad and Detective Chief Superintendent Reginald Lester, head of Norfolk CID, operating from an incident room set up in Aylsham Parish Hall. On Thursday, the 12th of March, detectives began tracing and interviewing all of the 20 passengers and the bus conductor who had been on the 10:30 p.m. number 10 bus back from Norwich. It was confirmed that Susan had safely reached Aylsham Marketplace and appeared cheerful when she left the bus. A full post-mortem was then conducted on Friday the 13th of March at the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital mortuary by the Home Office pathologist. The cause of death is confirmed as asphyxiation due to strangulation, with the method either manual or ligature. There were also signs of blunt force trauma to the head and neck, consistent with a struggle. Bruising and abrasions around the neck, face and upper body indicated Susan was overpowered and dragged. The time of death is estimated to have been between 10:30 p.m. on March 10th and 1 a.m. on March 11th, aligning with her bus arrival and the rural location. Additional forensics noted no evidence of prior sexual activity with consensual partners. The assault occurred post-mortem or peri-mortem. Toxicology was negative for drugs or alcohol beyond trace amounts, possibly from the evening out. This assault pointed to a killer who acted in a haze of panic rather than premeditated rage, as Detective Inspector Andy Guy would later describe in a 2020 review. From the outset, detectives believed that Susan, a careful girl who had been repeatedly warned by her parents never to accept lifts from strangers, must have entered the killer's car voluntarily, meaning the driver was almost certainly someone she knew or at least recognized from the town. Given the remote location of the murder in a so-called lover's lane, led detectives to believe her killer was somebody with local knowledge of Aylsham. From the very first hours, detectives' attention inevitably turned to 19-year-old Brian Tungate, Susan's boyfriend of about 4 months, given he was the last person known to have been with her that evening. Having danced together at the Gala Ballroom and shared supper at his mother's house, Brian confirmed he had walked her to the Norwich bus station, kissed her goodnight at 10:25 p.m. and had watched the double-decker bus pull away. He was interviewed at length, provided a detailed statement, and voluntarily gave a blood sample when the rare grouping was announced. His alibi, returning straight home to his parents' house in Norwich, was corroborated by his mother and later by neighbors who had heard him arrive. Within days, Brian was completely eliminated as a suspect, both forensically and by timeline. Detectives described the young apprentice gas fitter as utterly distraught and noted that the couple had been excitedly discussing engagement rings only weeks earlier. Far from being the killer, Brian Tungate would carry the weight of that final goodbye for the rest of his life. On the 1st of April 1970, 3 weeks after the murder, police revealed via the media that they had recovered Susan's right slingback shoe from the verge at Spratt's Green and appealed to dog walkers and hikers to be on the lookout for the missing left shoe and also a distinctive blue and white bracelet. Throughout May 1970, teams of Scotland Yard doctors, working from a temporary clinic in Aylsham Parish Hall, took voluntary blood samples from over 1,000 adult males living in Aylsham and the surrounding villages, where queues formed under the watchful eyes of Scotland Yard officers, each man pricking his finger in hopes of clearing his name, or dreading what it might reveal. Every sample was tested against a rare blood group recovered from Susan's fingernails and clothing. Every man was eliminated. In November of 1970, police issued a nationwide appeal for information about a metallic maroon older model Ford, most likely a 1959 to 1961 make, that had been recently resprayed, giving it an unmistakable sheen under streetlights. They also sought 2 men, described as chatty locals, who had been seen the previous week in a green Ford Anglia estate, speaking to Susan, perhaps offering her a casual lift she'd later regret, on Aylsham Marketplace in the week prior to her murder. And a further appeal was made for the driver of the vehicle seen parking near the Mucklands sewage works on Burgh Road at 12:30 a.m. on Wednesday 11th of March to come forward. However, none of these appeals produced any actionable leads despite the major publicity, with the drivers and vehicles remaining untraced. And by February 1971, the investigation had stalled, having interviewed more than 20,000 people and having taken blood samples from virtually every adult male in the Aylsham area and far beyond. Detectives had questioned all of Susan's colleagues at Norwich Union, but nothing substantial had been unearthed. Police had even traced and eliminated RAF personnel who had been stationed at the nearby RAF Cultishol or posted overseas to Singapore and the Persian Gulf. Again, they drew a blank. As the days turned to weeks, the weeks to months and the months to years, Susan Long's murder investigation turned cold. And in that quiet Norfolk village of Aylsham, Susan Long's parents returned each evening to a house that suddenly felt far too large and far too silent. The bedroom upstairs remained untouched, her coat still hanging by the door as though she might walk in at any moment. They were left to carry an unbearable grief while haunted by the chilling thought that they had almost certainly passed her killer on the street, nodded to him in the post office queue, or stood beside him in the butcher's shop, never knowing the monster and neighbor were one and the same. Despite exhaustive police inquiries, the trail grew colder with each passing year, leaving Mr. and Mrs. Long to endure a lifetime of unanswered questions and a pain that no amount of time could ever heal. Molly, who outlived her husband Derek by years, wore Susan's signet ring every day until her own death in 2014 at age 89, its gold band a silent accusation against the empty chair at tea. Buried at Aylsham Parish Church under a stone-etched "Reunited with Susan," she took her vigil to the grave, her final years shadowed by appeals that dangled justice just out of reach. In May 2004, forensic scientists at the Forensic Science Service Laboratory finally produced a full male DNA profile from the original semen and blood evidence that had been preserved since 1970. Norfolk Constabulary immediately relaunched the inquiry, and over the following months, they took new elimination swabs from more than 100 surviving men who had lived close to Spratt's Green in 1970. But none matched. Despite a full DNA profile, there were no hits in the National DNA Database. By 2010, familial DNA techniques, scanning databases for close relatives via likelihood ratios, yielded promising threads, but the profile remained a ghost in the system. The absence of any DNA database hit strongly suggests that Susan Long's killer either died before the National DNA Database began mass sampling in the mid-90s, or he never committed another offense serious enough to require a DNA sample thereafter. Never gave a voluntary sample during the original 1970s investigation, and has no close relatives whose DNA has been uploaded through modern familial search programs. In short, the man who left his genetic calling card on Susan's clothing has, for whatever reason, remained biologically invisible to the police ever since. And as of the airing of this documentary, the murder of Susan Long, the only child of Derek and Molly Long of Sir William's Lane, the girl who ate tea at her first boyfriend's house, kissed him goodbye at Norwich bus station and stepped off the last bus of the night, remains officially unsolved. The complete DNA profile of her killer is held on the National DNA Database, and the file is still live with Norfolk Constabulary's major investigation team. Detectives continue to believe that the answer lies somewhere in Aylsham or its immediate surroundings, and that someone, even now, knows the name of the man whose blood Susan carried beneath her fingernails on the night of March 10, 1970. Thank you for watching and listening to Susan's story. Please feel free to leave your own thoughts and comments down below, and we'll see you next time.